All right, so I said I was going to do these at least once a week. And tomorrow night is going to be a big night for us in the United States. And by the time this uploads, it'll actually be today. But we have two 80-year-old, give or take, geezers that are going to decide and try and tell us what the future of our country is going to look like, which is comical if you think about it. I mean, way to go, Gen X. we have not stepped up to the starting line yet, have we? But one of the subjects that one of the geezers talked about just a couple weeks back was the FDIC. And they said they wanted to gut the FDIC and the Fed. And what I found telling was when I had a conversation, and I've had this conversation before, is how many people do not know what the Federal Reserve is and what the FDIC is. They are not the same thing. And the fact that any 80-year-old give or take geezer doesn't know that and surrounds himself with people that don't know that is scary. So I wanted to talk about, obviously I want to talk about the Fed, the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve is a big thing. It'd be like you and me sitting down to share one of those giant all-you-can-eat shrimp platters for two, and that included endless dessert and endless espresso afterwards, right? It's a glutton for punishment conversation, or it's a long one. And I'm trying to break these down into smaller bits of 15 minutes or less, because I feel like if you really wanted to watch a documentary on how all this works, you could watch a documentary on the FDIC that would cover just about absolutely everything that they do in about an hour. Okay, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the detail and whether or not they do interviews and stuff like that. But you don't want that, or you wouldn't be watching me. Plus, we all are a little bit trying to understand stuff at a faster pace, I think. So I'm going to give you the crust of it, of what the FDIC is and why we don't want to gut the FDIC. We don't really want to gut the Federal Reserve either, but I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about the FDIC and why we don't want it to go away. So most of us have seen the sticker, the FDIC sticker or plaque at our bank that says protected and insured by the FDIC. Deposits protected and insured. And that means your savings, your checking account, those are all protected by the FDIC. And in a credit union, its counterpart is the NCUA. Okay? So as I talk about the FDIC, know that basically the NCUA does the same thing, only for credit unions. And what the FDIC does is they make sure that your deposit and my deposits are safe. Our money, our neighbor's money in a bank is completely safe. If that bank mismanages what it does with our deposited funds, because they invest it, right? That's how they make the interest that they pay on the savings accounts and on the checking accounts. So if they misinvest our money, if they do bad loans and they end up losing our money, the FDIC makes our accounts whole, shops for another bank to take over our accounts, and makes sure as that bank shutters, you and I do not lose our money. And the reason they exist like that is because after the stock market crash in 1929, what they ended up finding out is banks nationwide, I mean, we're talking 95% of the population lost all of their savings in the stock market crash of 1929 because banks basically had all the money invested in the stock market and lost their money, which wasn't their money to lose. It was people who deposited money into those banks. Your money, my money, our money as a collective group as we put our money in. And what they found out in the 1930s as they analyzed this is a lot of those banks pre-1929 were basically playing the shell game with our deposits. So they were already going under. The stock market crash just took it all. That was the end of it. And the FDIC is to prevent that from ever happening again to you or I, where our bank goes under and you and I are left with no savings, nothing in our checking account to pay the bills out of the paycheck that just supposedly went in there. That basically the account no longer exists because the bank shuttered and walked away and we are left holding the bag. The FDIC is to prevent that. So what the FDIC used to do is monitor 100% of the banks that were insured by it. And they made sure that they did audits, they checked their books, they made sure every bank in this country was solvent. And those that were not solvent, the FDIC either helped them become solvent again, right? Or if they couldn't get them solvent again, the FDIC made our accounts whole and then went shopping for another bank to take over the accounts. And what happened for most of the boomers in their lifetimes so far, and certainly the silent generation following the implementation of the FDIC, no one ever noticed this. You just got a letter in the mail that said, such and such bank has taken over your bank and your account numbers for the time being are staying the same. And they're going to issue you new ATM cards and new credit cards and blah, 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 blah. Poof, done. Right? But that same geezer and his group of weirdos that I'm not supposed to talk about, they had made changes and positioned us where the FDIC now only monitors basically the largest 1/5, 20% of the banks in this country, and 80% are no longer monitored. Okay. And because those 80% are no longer monitored, the FDIC doesn't actually know that they're going under until the newspapers do, which causes you and I angst. And it affects our economy, and it affects our faith in our banking system. And because of that, that is a bad thing. We all understand that if we don't have faith in our banking system and in our economy, that can cause problems. It certainly did after the stock market crash of 1929. So we already know this. We know it will do that. It's not a question of if. We already know. So these changes that they've already done have made it so that, like, you and I got to hear about that First National Bank in New York City that literally is one in the top, just shy of that top 20% that the FDIC still watches. They weren't watching it. So the people that had money in it were worried that they weren't going to have their money because it hit the newspapers and holy shit. And you have, at least in your lifetime, if you're a Gen Xer, most millennials also probably gotten one of those letters that your credit union or your bank have been taken over by somebody else. They haven't been taken over by somebody else. If a bank is properly managed, they don't go under. They don't get taken over. The only way they get taken over is if they are mismanaging money and somebody comes in there and fixes it for us. That's what the FDIC used to do without you or I ever knowing about it, and without our economy being affected, and without our banking system being affected. It was invisible for you and me. That was what the FDIC did. And yes, they do it on our tax money. But it's our tax money, you and me, protecting you and me. When they say they want to gut it, we already know what it looks like if they gut it. Except for one thing that none of us alive now, because most silent generation, pretty much all the silent generation is gone. And the ones that are alive probably were not born before the stock market crash. And even if they were born before the stock market crash, they weren't old enough to remember it, but they can tell us about what happened afterwards. But we know the end result, if there's no oversight and there's nobody to swoop in and put the money back that these idiots, that these irresponsible corporate bankers have lost, if there's nobody in there to swoop in and put our money back and make us whole and protect us, we already know what it looks like. The only reason to gut the FDIC is to turn us into a shithole country with 96% of us having no money at all. Because, let's be honest, we know 80% plus of the money is held by 4% of the population. So I'm talking to the other 96% of us, including some of those bankers that are irresponsible and greedy, imagining that they might make it into that 4%. What's really important takeaway here is we need the FDIC, period. You and I do. Average America does. Poor America does. Even upper middle class America does. And when these people tell you they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and they scream smaller government, ask them how. Ask them why. Most importantly, ask them what it's going to look like afterwards. It's the only reason for me to be talking at all is because this issue is huge for you and me. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about what happens if they gut the FDIC. Well, now you know if you've watched this video. That's what happens if they gut the FDIC. You and I, if a bank is mismanaged and goes under, lose our money if we have money in that bank. Is that where you want to be? Do you want to have your paychecks and your savings and all of a sudden, poof, that bank is gone and all of the money that you have in your bank accounts is gone too? No? Then you better not consider the shitbag that's talking about gutting it, huh? Those shitbags obviously don't know what they're talking about. Think about it. Peace.